They called her Gift, but it was a cruel name. She stood in the middle of the grand chamber, bound by golden cords that shimmered not with beauty, but with humiliation. Her skin was pale lavender, marked with ceremonial scars of her people, and her wide silver eyes tried not to show fear. Around her, the nobles of the Zarkari Empire roared with laughter. To them, this was comedy, a diplomatic prank at the highest level. A useless hybrid, half-caste, born of a failed breeding program and abandoned by both sides. She was to be given as a jest, a token of mockery, to the human emissary who had dared enter the Zarkari royal court alone. The human, Commander Elias. Ward stood silently, expression unreadable beneath the thick atmosphere of derision and alien wine. Tall, scarred, with weary eyes that had seen too much war and too little peace, Elias made no move as the Empress herself offered him the gift. Her voice rang like glass striking marble. A companion for your journey back to Earth, human. She will entertain you. She knows how to kneel. The hall erupted with another wave of cruel laughter, but Elias remained motionless. He looked at the girl not as property, not as an object, but as someone. Someone terrified, someone trembling, someone who didn't want to be there. She met his eyes briefly, then looked down. Everyone expected him to laugh, to play along, to leash her or reject her. That was the game. That was the insult. That was the joke. But Elias did something no one expected. He took off his weapon belt, let it drop to the floor with a heavy thud, and walked toward her, not like a soldier, but like a man stepping towards something delicate. He knelt, not her. Slowly, wordlessly, he reached up and removed the heavy ceremonial collar around her neck, letting it fall to the ground like broken chains. The laughter in the hall stilled into uneasy murmurs. She gasped, not understanding. Her eyes searched his for malice, for intent, for the punchline she was certain would follow, but never came. Elias rose to his feet, turned to the Empress, and spoke in a voice that silenced the hall. If this is your idea of humor, then I accept her not as a gift, but as someone you threw away. That says more about you than it ever will about her. He extended his hand, not demanding, not commanding, an offering. She hesitated. Then, with a trembling hand of her own, she took it. Together, they walked out of the chamber, leaving behind gasps and a silence far heavier than before. She didn't know what he wanted. She didn't know what he was. But as they crossed the shining bridge to his ship, the night air carrying the weight of 100 stairs, she realized something terrifying. This human might actually see her as a person, and that in the universe she came from was far more dangerous than chains. Asterisk. The ship hummed with quiet energy, its walls sterile and foreign to her, but not as cold as the palace she had left behind. She stood in the corridor like a statue, not daring to move, while the human who had unchained her moved with the slow caution of someone who had carried too many ghosts. Commander Elias Ward didn't speak at first. He simply handed her a thermal blanket, a glass of water, and a strange protein bar wrapped in thin plastic. Then he stepped back, not watching her as she sat slowly, cautiously on the edge of a small metal bench. Her hands shook. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. Her lips cracked, but she didn't ask questions. She was trained not to. Questions got you pain. She took a small bite, then looked at him, not with gratitude, not yet, but with suspicion softened by hunger. Elias noticed, but said nothing. He moved to the other side of the room, sat at the console, and began to log the departure. Clearance from Zarkari space, but his mind wasn't on the task. He kept glancing at her reflection in the metallic panel. The way her shoulders curled inward, the defensive posture, the way she flinched every time the ship vibrated, it told him enough. He'd seen it before in War Survivors, in liberated prisoners, and children who'd forgotten what love looked like. Still, he didn't ask. He knew she wouldn't answer. Not yet. When she finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. "Why did you do that?" Her voice was thin, breathy, a sound that barely touched the air. Elias turned, met her eyes, and paused. He didn't want to give her a speech or make himself sound noble. So he answered the only way that felt honest. "Because no one else did." She blinked, unsure if that was a joke or a riddle. But his face remained calm, steady. "You didn't know me," she said, voice growing louder with a strange, cautious defiance. "I could have been anything." He gave a slight nod, resting his elbows on his knees. "So could I." That silence between them grew thick, not hostile, not cold. Just full of things unspoken, names they didn't know, past they didn't share, and wounds neither had yet dared to reveal. But the silence didn't scare her the way other silences had. This one was different. It didn't wait to punish her. It simply existed, like the quiet between waves. Later, he showed her the crew quarters. She gasped when he pointed to one and said, "Yours. Not shared, not supervised, not locked. Just hers." It was small, yes, military standard, but it had a bed, a light, and a control panel she could use. She looked up at him, eyes wide. "You're not going to lock the door?" she asked, his brow furrowed, surprised. "Why would I?" She didn't answer. She just stood there, staring at the panel as if it might vanish if she blinked too hard. Then, slowly, she walked inside and sat on the edge of the bed, her thin fingers curling over the blanket as though anchoring herself to this unexpected moment. Elias didn't follow. He just stepped back and said softly, "Sleep, you're safe." No, and for the first time in cycles, she believed someone. Not because he had promised safety, but because he didn't try to control her. As the door slid closed, she stared at it for hours, waiting for it to open again, waiting for pain to follow kindness. But it never came. And sometime in that long, sleepless night, her body finally gave in. She curled up under the warm synthetic fibers and drifted into a dreamless sleep, unsure if tomorrow would be the same, but strangely, quietly hoping it would be Elias, sitting in the cockpit, didn't sleep. He watched the stars stretch across the viewport like silver veins through black skin, wondering who she was, why the Zarkari had chosen her, and what kind of joke the universe thought it was playing. She wasn't a warrior. She wasn't a spy. But she wasn't weak either. There was something in her eyes that reminded him of Earth's burned cities and the children who had made gardens out of rubble. She was something else. And whatever she was running from, he wasn't going to be the next one she had to run from. He didn't know her name, but he would earn the right to ask. Not as a commander, not as a savior, but as a human, asterisk. She didn't tell him her name for the first 3 days. Not because she refused, but because she no longer remembered if she had one that mattered. In the Empire, she had been called so many things. Asset, breeder, half-blood, mistake. Gift had just been the latest coat of paint on a broken wall. But Elias never called her anything except you or miss, or simply addressed her with eye contact and respectful silence, as though waiting for her to choose how she wished to be known. That small dignity, subtle as a feather in a hurricane, changed something in her. She began to speak more. First, about food. What was this? What did that button do? Then about Earth. Did it really have oceans with salt water? Trees tall as buildings? Rain that sang? And Elias, a soldier unaccustomed to chatter, listened, patiently, fully, like every question she asked mattered. On the 5th day, she walked into the cockpit and sat in the co-pilot's seat without being asked. Her skin looked less pale, her posture less defensive. She watched the stars scroll past the window with wide-eyed wonder and whispered, "I want to see Earth." Elias looked at her and gave the smallest of smiles, the kind that flickers before it fully forms. Then we'll get you there. That moment hung between them like gravity, invisible but undeniable. She didn't trust many things, but that promise felt like something she could rest her bones against. A shelter, not a chain. And slowly, in the gentle warmth of undemanding companionship, she began to share, not her whole story, not yet, but pieces. Memories, hints. She told him about the silence of the breeding chambers, the cold metal under her feet, the way the other girls stopped screaming after the first month. How she had learned to look busy, to look useful, to never meet the eyes of the Zarkari lords. She told him about music, how she had heard it once when a technician played an old recording on a smuggled device, and how it had made her cry even. Though she didn't understand why, Elias didn't interrupt. He just listened, eyes on the stars, hands still on the controls, his breathing steady and soft. When she faltered, he didn't push. He simply offered silence again. And in that silence, she realized he wasn't trying to fix her. He wasn't trying to rescue her. He was just there, present, real. That night, she brought him a drawing. It was made with a stylus on a blank tablet, crude, simple, shaky lines of a tree with wide roots and a sky above it full of swirling stars. "Is this what Earth looks like?" she asked shyly. Elias stared at it, then nodded. "That's exactly what it feels like." Then she smiled, truly smiled, for the first time since they'd met. Not the small nervous twitch of lips she'd given to please her captors. This one came from inside her, from a place deeper than memory, a place she had buried long ago. He looked at that smile like it was a sunrise after years of war. As the days passed, she began to help around the ship, not because he asked, but because she wanted to. She cleaned, repaired small panels, learned how to check fuel readings. She asked questions about stars, physics, gravity, time dilation. She was brilliant, quick, like her brain had only been waiting for someone to finally give it air. Elias noticed, and he started teaching her more. Not as a commander to a subordinate, but as a human to a human. As someone who believed in the spark of another soul. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they sat in long stretches of silence that didn't feel heavy anymore. Just calmed out on the 10th night, she walked into the common area while Elias was patching up his jacket. She stood there awkwardly, arms crossed, and said, "My name was Kelif. My mother whispered it before they took her." Elias looked up, meeting her eyes with that same steady calm. "Kelif," he repeated softly like a prayer. She nodded. "But you can call me Kale." And something in her chest tightened, not in pain, but in fear of something unfamiliar, being seen, being known, being real. Elias didn't smile. He just nodded and said, "Thank you, Kale, for trusting me with it." And Kale, who had once believed herself nothing more than a joke, felt something crack open inside her, not breaking. Blooming that asterisk had happened on the edge of the Solara drift. Just 3 light jumps from the Earth corridor. The ship jolted without warning, alarms flashing across the console like red lightning. Elias slammed his hand against the override switch and gritted his teeth. Inbound gravity well. Artificial. Kale felt the shift in her bones, the wrongness of the space around them, warping, folding, suffocating. They had been tracked, pulled, hunted. The ship trembled under the force of a tractor. Lock as something massive emerged from the shadows of folded space. A Zarkari dread cruiser, black as oil, its hull covered in ceremonial markings that gleamed like scars. Kale backed away from the viewport as though it might swallow her. Her breath quickened, panic gripping her chest like a cold claw. She knew that ship. She knew what it carried. Elias stood slowly, his jaw tight, his eyes already calculating. "They knew we'd run," he muttered. "They were never going to let you go." He turned to Kale, his voice low but urgent. Get to the core chamber. Don't open it for anyone but me. Do you understand? She hesitated, eyes wide with fear. It'll take me again, she whispered. They'll make sure I never speak. I know secrets. I wasn't just bred, I was selected, enhanced. They want me buried. Elias stepped forward, hands gentle but firm as he gripped her shoulders. Then we don't let them win, not today. The comms crackled, and a voice slithered through the speakers like a hiss of venom. Commander Ward, you have property that belongs to the Empire. Return the asset or be destroyed. Kale flinched at the word. Property. She had heard it all her life, but from his ship, it sounded more violent than ever. Ilias walked to the comm panel and spoke with the calm of a man who had made peace with fire. If you think she's property, he said, then you've already lost everything that ever made your species worth listening to. There was silence, then a laugh. Cold, imperial, the voice responded. You were always naive, human. She was never meant to live. She was meant to carry. Her genes hold the next phase of evolution. We needed a womb, not a voice, and we were done with her until you made her matter. Kale gasped, her knees giving way. The room tilted around. Hers, the truth punched through her like a blade. She had always suspected, but hearing it said aloud shattered something fragile she had been holding on to. She had been grown, not born. Designed, not loved. A mother of monsters. Not a daughter. Of anything. She curled into herself, shaking, her breaths coming sharp and shallow. Elias was beside her in seconds. Not with comfort, but with presence, with silence, with strength. He didn't tell her she was wrong to cry. He didn't try to stop the truth from crashing over her. He just held her steady, a hand against her back like an anchor. And when she spoke, it came out like broken glass. They want to use my children. They want to grow armies inside me. I was their plan all along. Elias nodded, his face dark with rage he dared not show her yet. Then we break the plan. That night, Elias revealed something too. He showed her a sealed file, encoded and hidden deep in the ship's eye. It was marked Protocol Lysa. It showed a message from Earth Command, dated months before he arrived in Zarkari space. Retrieve subject Caliph. Priority level, red. She is the key to the Zarkari genetic program. If she falls into their hands again, the war is lost. Kale stared at the file, her hands trembling. So you were sent for me all along? She asked, voice cracking. Elias shook his head. I was sent for a threat. I found a person. They're not the same. She looked at him, eyes swimming with hurt and hope and confusion. Would you have killed me if I had been a threat? He met her gaze without blinking. Only if you stopped being human, and Kale, you're more human than most I've ever known. She broke then, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of someone seeing her. The truth was out now. The Zarkari wanted her not because of who she was, but because of what she could become. And Elias, he had every reason to hand her over. But he hadn't, and that meant the future, for the first time, might belong to her. The dread cruiser loomed like a black sun behind them, a silent hunter blocking every path forward. Its presence warped the space around it, pressing like a weight on the hull of Elias's ship. In the control room, Kale watched the holographic star map flicker as the escape routes were sealed one by one. They weren't just being followed, they were being funneled. Trapped. The Zarkari weren't in a rush. They didn't need to be. They believed time and fear would deliver Kale back to them. But this time, Kale was no longer what they had created. She was becoming something else. And so was Elias Stott. He worked without pause, rerouting energy from the weapons system to the jump drive, running bypasses through fragile circuits and manual conduits. He knew what they were up against. A single misstep, one mistimed burn, and the ship would crack under the pressure. Kale watched him as he worked face. Drawn, arms trembling from exhaustion, but focused like the stars themselves would obey if he just willed them hard enough. She wanted to help, not hide, not run. Help. Her training had been meant for reproduction and obedience, but her mind had always wanted to learn. And Elias had given it space to grow. She sat beside him at the panel and, without asking, began typing. Her long fingers danced across the display with speed and clarity. Elias looked over, surprised, but didn't stop her. "Where'd you learn that protocol?" he asked. Kale didn't look up. "They thought I wasn't paying attention." She smiled faintly, the memory both bitter and proud. "But I always listened." Then came the proximity alert. The Zarkari cruiser launched a parasite beacon small, fast, and coded to fuse with their hull and disable the ship's core. Elias's hand slammed the controls. "No choice," he muttered. "We burn the fuel now, or we don't make it to Earth at all." Kale looked at the gauges. "But if we burn now, we don't have enough left for landing." Elias met her eyes. "We won't need to land if we're dead." The ship screamed as it punched forward in a risky maneuver straight through the wake of a dying comet that distorted Zarkari scanners. Heat surged, gravity warped. The stars turned into smears of light, and the pressure in Kale's ears became unbearable, but the beacon missed, just barely. The cruiser fell behind. They had a moment. A small one dot as they drifted in the quiet lull after the jump. Elias collapsed into his seat, chest heaving. Kale knelt beside him, wiped the blood from his temple where he'd hit the edge of the console. Her hands were careful, practiced now. "You should rest," she whispered. "You saved us." He smiled through cracked lips. "You saved us too. If you hadn't known that override, we'd be drifting in pieces." There was silence between them for a while, a different kind than before. He wasn't just her protector now. And she wasn't just his ward. There was something more. Something built under fire. Kale looked down at her hands, the same hands that once flinched at commands, now steady and sure. "They want to use me," she said softly, "to create heirs, super soldiers. Their future." She hesitated. What if I choose what future I give?" Elias turned to her, his voice quiet. "You already are." It was then that the secondary transmission came through a scrambled distress beacon from Earth Command. The signal was weak, distorted by interference. But the message was clear enough. If Subject Caliph is captured, Project Genesis will begin. Estimated casualties, planetary. Repeat, planetary. Kale stared at the screen in horror. She hadn't just been a breeding program. She was the blueprint. Her DNA, enhanced and weaponized, was the key to the Zarkari's plan to control entire species, a hybrid dominator line, built to manipulate biology itself. If they got her, they wouldn't need to conquer Earth. They could simply overwrite it. She stood in silence, the gravity of her existence settling into her bones like lead. Elias watched her carefully. "You still have a choice," he said. "We can turn back, find a deep sector. I can disappear. You can live, be free." But Kale shook her head, slowly. "I don't want to hide, not anymore." Her eyes burned not with fear, but with fire. "I want to fight, not with weapons, but by choosing who I become. If they built me to carry their future, then I will carry something else." And in that moment, Elias didn't see a girl bred in a lab. He didn't see an asset, a victim, or a political tool. He saw a human. Raw, powerful, beautiful. A girl reborn by her own will. The stars stretched before them, and the enemy waited in the shadows. But something had changed. Kale was no longer running. She was walking toward destiny. And Elias knew if the Zarkari wanted to rewrite the galaxy, they had chosen the wrong girl, Asterisk, they reached the orbital edge of Earth's protected zone, just as the Zarkari caught up. This time, the dread cruiser did not fire to disable. It came to conquer. Several smaller ships fanned out, each carrying boarding teams, genetic harvesters, and what Kale recognized instantly wombs of steel and glass. They weren't here to negotiate, they were here to take. Elias stood in the command bay, running diagnostics, weapon checks, shield toggles, but he knew none of it would hold. His ship had been built for diplomacy, not war. They were a single flame against a hurricane. And still, he didn't blink. Kale stood at the viewport, her face pale but firm. The lines of worry carved around her mouth were deep, but there was no fear in her eyes now. Only fury. For years, she had been nothing more than a vessel to them, a means to an end. But now, she understood the power in simply choosing her path. Her body, her voice, her mind were hers. No empire, no scientist, no prophecy could take that away. A broadcast flashed on the main screen. It was them. The high priest of genetics himself, the one who had overseen her creation. His voice was thin, regal, sharp like needles dipped in honey. "Keleth," he said, "we offer you a merciful return. Come with us, no more pain. We will elevate you, worship you. Let you be the mother of gods." Elias spat on the floor. Kale stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. Then she walked forward and activated the comms. Her voice clear, strong, rippled through the channels. "You made me in a lab. You used my mother. You erased my childhood. And now you call me a god because I escaped your leash?" She shook, her head, eyes burning with controlled rage. "I'm not your creation anymore. I'm human, and humans don't kneel." The priest's eyes narrowed. "Then you die with them." The assault began instantly. Explosions lit up the outer hull. The ship rocked violently. Elias grabbed the emergency throttle and veered downward toward Earth's gravitational pull. The Earth defense grid was still out of range minutes away. From responding, and minutes was all the Zarkari needed. One of the boarding pods latched onto the starboard wing, hissing and drilling through the plating like a parasite seeking blood. Elias turned to Kale. "We can't outrun this." "Not anymore. I have to trigger the manual detonation in the reactor if we want to stop them from getting you." Kale shook her head. "You'll die." He gave her a faint smile. "I've died before. This time it might mean something." But she stepped in front of him. Her voice trembled, but her feet did not. "No, you told me I get to choose." "Then, let me choose now. I'm going out there." Elias froze. "Kale, I know what they want. I know how their scanners work. If I go out on the wing just for a minute, I can blind the beacon targeting. They won't track us. You get us through. I give you that window. You won't survive open vacuum," he whispered. She met his gaze. "I was never meant to survive. I was meant to serve. But you gave me more than survival. You gave me a name." She moved before he could stop her, slipping into the pressure suit and launching herself onto the outer hull with nothing but a magnetic tether and sheer will. The cold bit into her instantly, even through the suit, but her heart burned hotter. She crawled toward the parasitic boarding module, wires whipping in the void, lasers cracking across the shield like thunder trapped in glass dot inside. Elias rerouted. Everything engine heat, life support, secondary power into a final charge. A slingshot maneuver toward Earth. As Kel reached the pod, she activated the pulse beacon she had wired herself using old Zarkari tech from her memory. It exploded. In a shimmer of light, disorienting the cruiser and frying their trackers for 20 seconds. 20 seconds, that was all Elias needed. He launched them forward, into the gravity well, toward Earth's defense range. The Zarkari cruiser flared in confusion behind them, unable to reacquire their signal. But Kale was still outside. The tether snapped. He saw her body tumbling, arms spread wide, stars spinning around her like petals in a silent storm. "No, Cal, no, no," he shouted, fighting with the controls. The suit's oxygen levels were red, the hull too damaged for a retraction. But as Earth's light touched the cockpit, a proximity alert flashed. A rescue drone Earth-built was. Closing in, they had made it. Kale, floating in the dark, saw the blue below her and whispered, voice faint in her helmet, "So, this is what freedom feels like." And then the light took her. She awoke to the soft hum of hospital machinery and the weight of warm sunlight streaming through a wide, clear window. For a moment, Kale thought she had died. But then she turned her head, slowly, painfully, and saw Earth not a simulation. Not a memory, but the real thing. Trees outside dancing in a gentle wind. Birds singing as if no war had ever existed. The air smelled clean, alive. She blinked, disoriented, her chest wrapped in gauze, her limbs aching in places she hadn't known could ache. That she was alive, somehow. Against all odds, she was still breathing. A voice spoke softly beside her. "You gave us quite the scare." Elias sat in the corner, his left arm wrapped in a brace, bandages lining his temple. His voice was rough, but his eyes, they held a relief so deep it cracked the weight of the past week. "The drone caught your tether just before the suit failed. You were unconscious for 3 days." He smiled, tired and proud. "But you made it." Kale tried to speak, but her throat was dry. He was already pouring her water, already lifting it gently to her lips. His hands were still calloused, still scarred, but the way he held the glass, the way he waited, there was reverence there. Not because she was a weapon, not because she was rare, but because she was someone worth saving. "You saved Earth," Elias said after a while. "The Defense Council reviewed your genetic profile. They know everything now about Project Genesis, about what the Zarkari were planning, about you." He paused, watching her reaction. "And they don't see you as a threat. They see you as a survivor, a hero." Kale shook her head slowly, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't do it to be a hero. I did it because I wanted to be more than what they made me." Her voice cracked. "I wanted to be human." Elias reached over, gently taking her hand in his. "You are, Kale. You always were. They just tried to erase it." And in his touch, she found the thing she had never known she needed: acknowledgement. Not of what she could do, but of who she was. Weeks passed. The war didn't end overnight, but Earth stood firm now, its defenses reinforced, its leaders united in ways they hadn't been in decades. And at the center of it all, a once nameless girl from an alien empire walked the halls of the Terran Assembly, not as a symbol, not as a puppet, but as an ambassador of a new generation. She spoke with clarity, with passion, about freedom, about consent, about what it meant to rebuild a life from nothing, and people listened. Because when Kale spoke, you felt the truth carved into every word. Elias stayed by her side, always in the background, always steady. He didn't crave the spotlight, didn't want recognition. He had saved lives in silence for too long to care for medals. But Kale often pulled him forward, introducing him not as her savior, but as her friend, her family. The one who had knelt when others mocked, who had listened when she was voiceless, who had waited for her to choose who she would be on the first. Spring of her second year on Earth, Kale stood on a quiet hill overlooking a valley of flowers. Children were playing nearby, some human, some hybrid, all laughing like the galaxy had never broken. Elias joined her, carrying 2 cups of hot tea. "You think they'll be ready?" she asked, watching the kids. "For the future?" Elias nodded, because they'll have you to remind them what it means to be strong without cruelty, to lead without fear. Kale looked down at her own hands once meant only to serve. Now they shaped futures. She didn't know if she'd ever be fully free of the scars, but scars didn't mean failure. They meant survival. They meant history. And they reminded her of the moment she stopped being a joke and started being real. One of the children, a Kong, small girl with soft lavender skin and dark human eyes, ran up to her and hugged her leg. "Mama Kale, tell us a story." Kale knelt, slowly smiling wide. "What kind of story?" "The one where you saved the stars," the girl whispered. Kale laughed, pulling her into her arms. "It's not my story alone," she said. "It's ours." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the hilltop, Kale whispered to the sky a quiet promise to the girl she used to be, the one who had no name, no power, no hope. "You are seen now, you are loved, and your story will never be forgotten."